All right, good morning. It is Friday, November 25th. Today's reading will be 2 Corinthians chapter 7 through 9. So chapter 7 carries a theme, but it carries into 8, and then 8 and 9 kind of go together. Not sure if I've covered that this year yet, but I'm not sure how inspired, preserved, whatever the case is, divisions in the Bible are, like chapters and verses. Jesus referred to Psalm 2, but however, Psalms would be different than everything else. But sometimes, thoughts are split between chapters, and we have to be careful for that. But notice Paul's joy here in chapter 7 is because of the people's reaction to his correction. Now, you see this in context. What it's talking about when it's talking about repentance, it's talking about repentance from sinful works. The correction given throughout 1 Corinthians, they repented of those works. Now, that didn't make them saved. This is a different type of repentance. This is the repentance that stops what we're doing. Back when I was in the Air Force, by our house, we lived on Fort Dix, even though we were in the Air Force. There was this little lake up over there we'd walk to occasionally, and ran into a guy once, and Bible believer. And he started getting on my case because, we go out and give the gospel, and he says, we used to do that. And he pointed to this verse here. He claimed that he gave the gospel to a lot of people and then made it easy believism of some sort. And he says, I heard all those people. And here's the verse he quoted. Verse 10. For godly sorrow worketh repentance to salvation, not to be repented of. So what he thought is this verse is talking about the salvation of our souls, and that's not what it's talking about. In context, don't even if it's for the more conservative position, don't take a verse out of context and apply it to something it doesn't mean. The guy that was sleeping with his father's wife repented. He stopped doing that. Doesn't mean he lost his salvation and gained it back, but he stopped. It talks about salvation. There's a different salvation for our life, and that's what it's talking about. When you finally get victory over something, it's just no longer an issue. That's what it's talking about. Chapters 8 and 9 is talking about giving. It's mostly talking about monetary giving. And then it's talking about the collection for the saints back in Jerusalem. As we've mentioned a couple times in the book of Acts, plan A, people were getting ready for the kingdom, and all of a sudden it switched to plan B. That left a lot of Jews kind of hanging. And so they were disowned, they lost their means of income. And so Paul was going about taking up offerings for those saints in Jerusalem. So these chapters have nothing to do with giving when we're talking about for the budget for the church. Now, remember, tithing is in the law, but it's not of the law. Abraham, Jacob both tithed before the law. Hebrews talks about people who die now collect tithes. Tithing is a starting point. We're not going to get hung up on that, but when it says here to give what you purpose in your heart, God loveth a cheerful giver, it's talking about these offerings that they're sending back to Jerusalem for the saints. This isn't tithes. This might be counted for offerings, but what it is talking about almsgiving. Remember, tithes, 10%. Offerings, giving to the church above that. But then when we give outside of that, that's alms, and a completely different thing. And one thing that I've witnessed started tithing in February, March, April of 1990, up until now, you couldn't talk me out of it. God's not a spiritual Al Capone that's going to keep all the problems away. But, throughout the Bible, it's teaching that if you give, you'll get, that God will open certain doors, will open certain things in our minds, our hearts, and our spirits. And our church is a generous one, so I'm not getting anybody's case here. All right. Hope this was helpful to you. Have a great day. We'll catch you tomorrow.